It has been said that Marvel Avengers Infinity War is the most ambitious crossover event in entertainment history. Well, my response to that is to look at your screen right now as DawgNation Daily makes an appearance on Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger, for the very first time. You know this guy? That's Jeff Sintel. My name is Brandon Adams. I'm in for Hannah Chalker tonight on what is an episode of Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger, that I am very excited about. Thanks for having me, Jeff Sintel, but most importantly, thanks for having my buddy, Eddie, also on the stage with us tonight as well.
Well, first of all, Brandon, without this sounding like a wrestling montage with Jimmy Hart or anybody else like that, I'm going to say this. This is the first time that me and him have ever shared the world headquarters stage.
That's right.
For the first time. And guys, ladies, gentlemen, this is not a hologram from our crack production team where they have overlaid Brandon Adams onto Hannah Chalker. She's still sipping wine in the wine country,
That's right.
I assume. Bachelorette weekend.
The hoity-toity life that she lives. And by the way, we should let you know, a lot of you have gotten used to seeing Hannah Chalker in this spot every Monday night. She'll be back again next week. I'm just keeping her chair warm while she's gone.
Some might say we traded in some blonde locks for a lot of worries about Georgia recruiting. So we got a less blonde, more worries, more fearsome. There you go.
Yeah, along those lines, I'll try to keep my editorializing to a minimum, but we do have a big show planned for you. Let's give you an idea of some of the things that you'll see tonight. Obviously, we're going to talk about the events coming up for G-Day later on this week. That's going to be a big deal. And an interview with Owen Pappoe that I'm really excited about, Jeff. That's going to be a ton of fun here as well. There's also Pappoe and some of his colleagues in the 4- and 5-star variety hanging out at Charlotte for the opening qualifier this week. That's also going to be a really interesting breakdown here a little bit later on, because Pappoe showed out, but he wasn't the only one with Georgia considerations who had a big performance taking that step towards this summer's big event.
Yeah, it's the Elite 11 regional. It was kind of like a half opening where you saw maybe some of the guys on display. And first of all, Owen Pappoe and all of his Grayson boys, they were at prom the night before. And those guys put on a show. Some people might officially, unofficially call the Elite 11 regional the Grayson High regional. Owen Pappoe, we'll dive into that a little bit later, but Owen Pappoe, excuse me. We'll dive into that a little bit later, but Owen put on a show in Charlotte.
We'll also take a lot of your comments about the program tonight. Obviously on Facebook Live, as you've become accustomed, here on Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger. YouTube as well. We'll look forward to saying hello to our YouTube audience. And for the very first time, we are streaming live on Twitter as well, Jeff. So lots of opportunities for folks to kind of get involved and say hello to us. And if you're a DawgNation viewer out there in the Warner Robins area, we've got a big thing we want to tell you about. Kroger's got something exciting for you coming up. Vince Dooley's going to be signing copies of his brand new book, The Legion's Fighting Bulldogs, this Wednesday. That's April the 18th from 3 to 5 p.m. at the Nixon Crossing Kroger off Highway 96. So if you're there in the WR, obviously you're excited about Jake Fromm's future at Georgia. You should also be excited about a big appearance from Coach Dooley there at the Nixon Crossing Kroger location right there off Highway 96. And of course, it's great to have Kroger as a part of Before the Hedges each week here on the DawgNation video channels. All right, let me dive into this. You mentioned Owen Pappoe. Big performance for him in Charlotte this week. Huge showdown. And listen, for me, this was another example. And by the way, we'll hear from Pappoe here in just a couple of minutes, a great interview that you were able to conduct with him. But before we get to that, for me, this was him sort of reasserting why there's so much attention being paid to him here this month. The decision at the beginning of May. He showed this week why he's the kind of prospect that makes that an appropriate conversation.
Yeah, Owen Pappoe, I mean, what we're looking at here, and I think it's only fitting, Brandon, because this young man has and is going to be the first 3-time invited guest attendee at the Nike Opening Finals. This year it's going to be in Texas. Owen has been destroying the field at the opening regionals this was his 3rd one now, and what he does is he goes out and sets a new standard. The highest opening regional score ever of 147.12. If everybody thought Nolan Smith's 141 from the Atlanta regional in about 40 degrees turned a lot of heads, look what Pappoe did here. Pappoe had a 45-inch power ball. He ran a 4-flat shuttle. That's as fast as Dominic Blaylock was right there, a 4.47.40. He also he had a vertical leap of 40 inches. And really, he told me, Brandon, he didn't really train for this at all. He didn't expect this at all. Now, of course, he wants to keep himself in really good shape, but he was at 6 feet 1 inch and 209 pounds, and inside linebacker of the future for somebody. They're going to be pretty happy. Also, the main thing they did, Brandon, is he also changed up his recruitment date.
Yeah, he absolutely did. All of a sudden now we're not thinking about that Cinco de Pappoe, which was that date we sort of had circled in our calendar for quite some time. That great sort of nickname for that date, we don't get to use that anymore. It's not Cinco de Poe anymore. Instead, it's a little earlier in the month of May, right?
I guess we're going to call it OPP Day for like a little nod there to Naughty by Nature and like 90s hip-hop fans, but wants to do it on May the 1st. That's kind of a combination of availability, grace, and spring practice is going to open up, and he doesn't want to have the crossover with that. And he's got a new commitment date in mind that's going to be May the 1st, and lots of details about Owen to talk about. You'll hear a lot of the words about how he chops up and slices his decision from the man himself. Owen is a guy that lots of people are talking about right
And
now.
before we actually get a chance to hear from Owen Pappoe ourselves here, you know, my opinion on this isn't, listen, I make no bones about this. I got the Georgia sweatshirt on tonight. Y'all know kind of where I come from in this, especially if you watch DawgNation daily in the mornings. I want Georgia to get Owen Pappoe. You know, I want Georgia to get him. And obviously there's a chance that somebody else may not. We'll hear some conversation about that a little bit later on. The idea that it may be Auburn or it may be, you know, some of the other schools that Pappoe's visited here. And if that happens, that's fine. But what I can't tolerate is any kind of discussion about the fact that, oh, well, Georgia doesn't really need Pappoe because they've got, you know, Channing Tindall for the class of 2018, or they've got Quay Walker for the class of 2018, or maybe other options, you know, potentially for the class of 2019, like Tresman Marshall, we'll talk more about later on in our show today. That's the conversation I really can't stomach a whole lot of, because at Charlotte this week, Pappoe showed why he is a prospect who is getting as much attention as he's getting.
Well, he did, and you know, I just wonder traditionally if you're talking about him as an inside backer prospect or maybe a future at star. Clearly the guy's a unique athlete. He can do anything expected of him or required of him, and I guess I'll leave one little tasty morsel in everybody's mouth. Everybody remembers Georgia's role is they're telling him Roquan Smith 2.0. And Owen's kind of like, nah, I'm going to be Owen, but they're going to have him doing all the things that Roquan Smith did. And I want everybody to hearken back to Roquan Smith's commitment. And right now there's a maelstrom of confusion, crystal balls, predictions, grapevine, you know, tinkering here and everything else right there. Kind of reminiscent of Roquan Smith. His recruitment was a little bit of a bumpy ride to Athens as well.
And it sounds like, based on what you've said on this show and other programs and things that you've written, that whatever the announcement is on May 1st, and we'll get a chance to sort of peek into Owen Pappoe's mind in here in just a moment, you think this goes well beyond May 1st into the month of December as well?
Yeah, he told me, Brandon, that when he makes his decision on May the 1st, he will still take at least 2 more official visits because he'll have 2 left for the fall. Georgia and Auburn, no matter what happens there in that pecking order, neither one of those schools are going to get an official visit from him if it's one of those 2 schools. But he also said he's not going to shut down. He's still going to take some visits. But also, in the same token, he's kind of tiptoeing through a lot of things right here. As a savvy media veteran he is still maintaining that what he's going to do when he makes his decision on May the 1st, Brandon, he's going to feel really good about it and going to feel pretty solid with that school.
On Facebook Live, Tyler Worthen says that Pappoe's coming to Georgia. You guys don't waste time on people who's not coming. The truth is, you get a chance to see for yourself Pappoe's thoughts about this in just a moment, and it'll be interesting to see after the interview that we'll play with Pappoe if the Georgia fan right there, Tyler, who was this confident before the interview, if he's still that confident after the interview's over, because Pappoe is one of these guys, and we'll see this for ourselves here in a moment, who clearly knows how to convey the message that he wants to convey. And right now, there seems to be, I think, a desire to sort of convey a bit of a mysterious message when it comes to Pappoe here just a little bit.
Yeah, and I guess I want to show cards a little bit, Brandon, because everybody wonders, okay, DawgNation guys are talking about Pappoe, then that must mean things are up or things are cooking. Well, we also work for Cox Media Group, which is a site that covers Auburn and covers LSU. The Diehards brand stretches across all the Power 5 conferences in college football. And so Owen Pappoe, whether he goes to Georgia or not, is still a major story as, in my mind, one of the 2 or 3 biggest recruits in the state of Georgia for 2019. And it's our obligation to be there no matter where he might be going.
Well, speaking of being there, Jeff was there this weekend in Charlotte for that Nike opening qualifier in which Owen Pappoe showed out in a big way, statistically speaking, but also spoke out in a big way about what his college future might be. Interesting conversation, our Jeff Sintel with Owen Pappoe here on Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger. Take a look right now.
Jeff Sintel, SEC Country, Cox Media Group, DawgNation.com, here with the new reigning title belt holder for Nike Opening Regionals, 147.12. Owen, a lot of people want to talk to you these days, man. And this is maybe the toughest question I'll ask you. it's going to be hard for you to decipher out these schools. But I think if anybody can handle weight on your shoulders, you've been exposed as a recruit. You've got good people in your ear for years and years and years. How close is this right now?
It's close. May. I know I was told everybody on Twitter it's going to be May 5th, but I'm actually moving it to May 1st, so that's when I'm going to announce my commitment. It's going to be on CBS and Fox Sports if y'all want to see it. And I really have an idea of who it's going to be. I'm going to make sure I visit two specific schools back to back. I ain't going to say who they are, but yeah, I'm going to make sure I visit them back to back, and I'm going to make my decision based off of them.
What do the officials look like? Because I know there's a Texas maybe in there, a Penn State in there. You've done LSU. What do the official plan look like?
Official? Yeah, so I went to LSU last week. I'm going to Penn State this Friday. Next week I'm going to Texas. And I'm going to make sure I take 2 more in the fall. Is
it accurate to say Georgia, Alabama, Georgia, Auburn up top? Who's figuring it out? What's the best way we can describe this right now?
I mean, people, I've said Georgia's my top school. They are. People say Auburn's coming in the picture. I mean, I guess so, but yeah.
Have any of these schools noticed, I mean, the chatter, the crystal balls, everybody saying the Auburn's in there on you? Has the Georgia coaches and Schumann and all, have they responded in kind? Can you describe how that's been?
Yeah, they like, what's all this talk about Auburn? I'm like, Coach, just let the media be the media. I just told them, if you don't hear something coming from me, just don't listen to it. That's what I tell them.
What do you think sparked all this stuff? Was it the 3-day trip to Auburn and everybody started thinking, you know, sometimes people in the business go, oh, is there a silent out there? Is there not a silent out there? How would you respond to that stuff?
I'll say, like, don't get me wrong. Like, I really do have interest in Auburn, but, like, you don't got to go saying, oh, he going to Auburn now, he going to Auburn now, but nah.
How did Auburn catch up?
How they catch up? Man, every time I went there, it's always been a game or like a camp, so, you know, everything's moving fast. I never really spent time with the coaches over there, so me just getting to spend time with them meeting my family, actually sitting down and watching film with them, you know, it really caught my interest.
As of right now, do you have a leader, and how close is it? Would you describe it?
I don't have a leader.
No leader right there. Owen, what do you think will maybe be the biggest reason it would be Georgia if you eventually went in Georgia's direction?
Reason? Shoot, man, just stay home, play with my brothers. Yeah.
The biggest reason for Auburn, if it is Auburn, what do you think they will have done in order to maybe turn you away from a public leader of Georgia a little while ago?
Just to see how the recruiting class goes. Wherever I go, I want to make sure I come in with some dogs too.
So candid comments there from Owen Pappoe about why Auburn is caught up with Georgia, but you also can't help but notice a bit of a contrast in terms of, on the one hand, there is no obvious leader here, yet on the other hand, he sort of at one point says, I think I may know where I want to go. Is this Owen being confused, or is this Owen trying to sow some ideas of confusion about his ultimate decision?
Well, I think, Brendan, what this is a very savvy player in the media game. I think Owen's been interviewed as much as anybody in this class. Remember, his first offers came in early 2015. He's been heavily recruited after his gangbusters freshman season at Grayson, where he started in the playoffs. I think this is a mixed message where he does not want to name a leader, especially this close to his decision. We've seen that tactic a lot, but he also wants to talk about how close this thing is at the same time, and he has a school in mind, but then he also needs to take 2 more visits to figure it out.
Is this a relationship deal? Is his relationship with Travis Williams, the Auburn linebackers coach, just better than his relationship with Glenn Schumann right now?
I don't think it is. I think it's just undiscovered country a little bit with Auburn. He spoke to me about, like, he finally made a visit to Auburn where he wasn't at a game, he wasn't at a camp, and he really got some FaceTime. Some family was involved. They came out there as well. I think Auburn is just an avenue he really needs to explore, and he really likes it right now, Brandon. So that's why this decision is growing to be so tough.
Of course, Owen Pappoe is a potential UGA commit. We'll find out on May 1st what his decision is. But a current UGA commit, Nolan Smith, a little bit like Owen Pappoe, and there's a little bit of drama with Nolan Smith, the end of his recruitment whenever it does come. Owen Pappoe had a chance to sort of weigh in on that subject. Jeff, you caught up with him Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger. Let's take a look at more from Owen Pappoe here. This time, not talking about himself, but talking about another player of interest to Georgia fans. That's Nolan Smith. Enjoy it right now.
Is there a Georgia commitment that still continues to hammer away at you because he wants to play with you? Is there one out there?
Yes, sir.
Please describe that gentleman and whether he's getting any better in the stretch run.
No, he's getting better. He's getting better. Yeah, man. He was texting me this morning before I came here. He said this morning, but yeah, he do a good job recruiting. Him and Jaden.
Do you have some bragging rights now over Nolan? Are you going to hold this over his head a little bit?
There you go.
What is the truest and most honest thing you can say right now about your decision?
About my decision? I've been getting offers since 8th grade. I've put a lot of thought into it, so I believe whatever decision I make is going to be the right one for me.
Can people start looking into gloves and backpacks and now tuxedo things for you? Or please explain the conspiracy theories behind the red and black tuxedo.
That's my book bag right there. But no comment. No comment.
What's left for the Bulldogs? What do they have to do to secure this thing?
They don't really have to do anything special. Like how they've been recruiting me this far is really good. So,
what does Auburn need to do in order to maybe seal the deal?
Like I said, I just want to make sure I play with some dogs. So I want to see how their recruiting class goes.
How has your community and friends and circle reacted to, oh, he's trending to Auburn? How have you heard from locals and Grayson High School fans?
People just look at it. Everybody think I'm going to Georgia, so I just let everybody think what they want to think. They'll see May 1st.
So a couple quick thoughts there. First of all, on the equipment, obviously UGA fans love seeing the Georgia backpack for Owen Pappoe. I think sometimes, though, the equipment can be a little bit of a misleading, a little false positive. Think about Aubrey Solomon back for the class of 2017. He was always sort of wearing that Georgia mouth guard. That ends up not being good news for Georgia. The purple and gold gloves, almost LSU colors. You can also see Pappoe wearing those at some point on the event in Charlotte. This stuff ends up being a bit of a false positive, right?
Yeah, I mean, he wore a Georgia zip-up windbreaker as well, Brandon. He had LSU gloves. He had a Georgia backpack. The fact that he's answering questions by pointing at his backpack, I'm sure someone will really go CSI and put a microphone glass up, a microscopic look at what he's doing right there with Owen Pappoe. I think this is a guy that is a heralded recruit. It's supposed to be difficult. It's supposed to be 2 or 3 teams in it down the stretch. Otherwise, this wouldn't be the type of recruit, the nation's #1 outside linebacker, that everybody gets excited about.
All right, let's talk about some more guys who were in Charlotte and really showed out. A lot of these guys are, guys that have growing UGA interest. Maybe you could say Georgia interest growing in them as well. And as we talked about on DawgNation Daily on Friday, also maybe a little bit bigger national recruiting footprint you're going to see in this conversation in terms of how this is shaping up for Georgia. Let me start with Brandon Smith here. And I guess I don't want to be too trite in how I describe this, but it almost seems like Smith in some ways could almost be like Owen Pappoe insurance. Is that a fair description of what Brandon Smith might be?
Brandon could be a lot of things. He is a top linebacker recruit on a lot of people's boards. He's being looked at as a middle linebacker from projections, basically because he just plays that in his high school in Louisa County in Virginia. But what he's going to do here is you keep looking at him as 6'4.5", 229 pounds. Timed a 4.59 in the laser at the 40. Looked really good. I think his spark score was around 106. Continues to say really good things about Georgia. Tresman Marshall would also be some Owen Pappoe insurance as well at inside linebacker. So he's just a guy, long, very smart, very fluid. Look at those clips there. Really good looking profile of an athlete right there. And just the type of guy Georgia goes after now.
And as we've said, a guy from Virginia. You've got, Rose Bowl victory in California, trip to Notre Dame. That's a lot of national prestige for Georgia on TV a lot across the country. That gets the attention of guys in Virginia, does it not? Guys like Smith in this case.
Yeah, Smith is a guy. I mean, you look at him, and I think the board at Georgia would include Pappoe, Marshall, and a guy like Brandon Smith if they could get him. I always remember this kid he's a guy that's going to play well, play early. A lot of big schools are in on him, and he's already taken an unofficial visit to Georgia last year, 2 unofficial visits last year. So you like that if you're thinking about Georgia's chances, especially with an out-of-area guy.
Let me transition to Quavaris Crouch here for a moment, because when we first talked about this young man, it was in that discussion of, okay, Georgia wants to go after that elite running back for 2019. At one point in time, that's kind of what he was, but now there's some debate in the recruiting community about, is this more of a pass-rushing outside linebacker, maybe less of the elite running back? He may be both, but there's apparently maybe a decision coming here at some point.
Well, he's going to early enrollee. He is more of a hybrid, he thinks. You look at him and you think this is what Derrick Henry looked like when he was a high school recruit.
Good comparison.
But he has been seen as the #1 recruit, I think, overall on Rivals. Didn't compete at the Nike opening because he's overcoming an injury, a minor injury and everything else like that. But I'm going to be very clear. I spoke to Quavaris Couch at the Nike opening regional in Charlotte. He's a little worried about all the backs at Georgia. He's also not sure whether he's a running back or a linebacker. Most schools are recruiting him as whatever you want to be, dude. We'll get you in our locker room. The other thing to think about Quavaris Couch is he's basically told me that he's leaning towards playing linebacker in college as well. But when you ask him about Georgia, he brings up running backs, and they got a lot of guys. knows Zamir White really well. So a lot of people wonder about, Quavaris Couch in Georgia out of North Carolina. I don't think the chances are really good with Crouch right now.
Sounds like there's some Alabama interest. You made the comparison to Derrick Henry a moment ago. It sounds like with Couch, there's definitely some Alabama interest here, correct?
Yeah, there's a lot of schools. I mean, Tennessee's in there with him. South Carolina's in there with him. Clemson's in there with him. Georgia's one of those schools that still recruits him, and he still brings up Georgia in interview conversations. But he's also got Michigan and talking about other schools like that as well for Quavaris Crouch. He's a guy that's going to early enroll, and he is going to take a look at a lot of more schools. But right now, if you're thinking about Quavaris Couch and maybe another big-time type 5-star running back type, I don't even know if he's a 5-star running back type anymore. I think the best way to classify him is an athlete, because he looks at it this way, Brandon. Where can I make 15 seasons of playing pro football and 15 years of paychecks? That's why he's thinking linebacker.
We talked about Owen Pappoe a lot at the beginning of our show here before the Hedges presented by Kroger. He's obviously a part of that Grayson powerhouse, one of the top high school programs in the entire country. But he's not the only elite prospect for Grayson. You can also mention Wanya Morris's name here, a terrific offensive lineman, about to choose between both Auburn and Tennessee. A couple questions on him. First of all, why didn't Georgia ever get more involved in Morris here?
Well, I think Wanya Morris is a great example of how fluid recruiting is with these teenage boys and how quickly things has changed. Brandon, I'll take you back to a conversation at the Future 50 in January. It seemed pretty certain to me that he was either going to choose Florida State, Georgia, or Oklahoma. Now none of those schools are in the mix. It's down to Tennessee and Auburn. He's going to take his official visit to Tennessee this week. He told me Auburn will get his last official visit. He's going to decide basically the same time when Owen Pappoe does on May the 1st from that live ceremony, wherever it may be, regarding Grayson's prospects. 6'5", 6'6", 299. Brandon, he had a 106 spark score. He had a 4.50 short shuttle. Almost broke 5 flat in the 40. He told me basically he was just ready for a location change in terms of Georgia. Wanted to get a little bit farther away from home and get a little bit different look when it comes to his college life.
Of course, a lot of you have been weighing in on our comment section all night long, and one of the comments we heard from somebody earlier is, Georgia wants Pappoe, but hasn't been heavily involved in a lot of these Grayson prospects, including Wanya Morris. Is that hurting Georgia with Pappoe right now?
I don't think so. I think Pappoe, one of the things to look about with Grayson and Pappoe is, how you can't kind of look at the backpack and the wardrobe choices. I think these Grayson guys, there's going to be about 19 gajillion guys from Grayson that are going to play somewhere. Some of them are going to different spots. Ja'Kai Clark committed to Auburn. It sounds like Tennessee might be still the team to beat there for Wanya Morris, but Auburn's closing fast, and I think they're going to end up in a lot of places. Kenyatta Watson was a great guy, 45-inch vertical. He's likely going to Texas or Notre Dame, very close with Pappoe. I just think everybody's going to find their individual best fit and let the chips fall.
Kirby Smart had some candid comments last week about the current state of his 2018 Georgia Bulldogs. He's concerned about the depth along the defensive line, explicitly stating that Georgia needs more big defensive tackles of that 290, 300-pound plus variety. Well, for the class of 2019, one of the guys who certainly checks that box from a weight standpoint is C.J. Clark. He's from North Carolina, more than 300 pounds. Is Clark the kind of guy right now, though, that fits what Kirby Smart's looking for, or is there more work that he needs to do on the recruiting trail to really get Smart and Trey Scott's attention?
Well, I think I'm glad we're talking about C.J. Clark today, because what we need to know here is, remember Derek Greene just recommits back to Oklahoma. He was one of that North Carolina trio with those Trey Scott intentions that were that were really connected to that guy going back a lot of ways. Well, C.J. Clark, I eyeballed him a lot. I watched a lot of him at the Nike opening, and I'm going to call him a project right now. Not going to be a fire-breathing dragon, going to win a lot of reps early. Might be a guy that looks to me like a redshirt candidate for Georgia, should he choose Georgia and everything else like that. So I'm going to say C.J. Clark, although he's important. And Brendan, remember, Kirby Smart said something very unique at his press briefing on Saturday. He said that Georgia would like to sign up to 5 defensive tackles.
Yeah.
A little bit of show cards there, but he wanted to show how important the position was for 2019.
And you got to be big, right? I mean, you got to have that size. Taquan Hawkins-Muggle's going to try to fit some of that role for Georgia here this season, but you got to have that next guy in the line to do some of those things that John Atkins has done.
I think everybody, most of the fan base, just is going to be happy if you can sit there and say Georgia checks off 4 defensive tackles. He got some resume with some 4 stars and some size and some weight. But C.J. Clark is a guy that, some people, even really smart football people, think he might be a guard is his best position on Saturdays. And that's because they're not quite sure about C.J. Clark coming in and really knocking heads and really getting up a depth chart early in his career.
That is Jeff Sintel. He's DawgNation's recruiting insider. Thanks for having me on the program tonight as well. My name is Brandon Adams. You're watching Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger. And Kroger's got a great event coming up this week they want you to know about. It's this upcoming Wednesday for those near Warner Robins. It's Vince Dooley, the legendary former Georgia coach, signing copies of his new book, The Legion's Fighting Bulldogs. It's this Wednesday from 3 to 5 p.m. at the Nixon Crossing Kroger off Highway 96. Always a great opportunity there to catch up with Coach Dooley in Warner Robins on Wednesday. That's going to be a lot of fun. Of course, Coach Dooley, a long history of great books coming from him. Exciting to see him there in Warner Robins on Wednesday. Also exciting to see how this 2019 class for Georgia continues to take shape and grow in terms of offers that have been extended here. As you mentioned, Kirby Smart sort of showing his hand a little bit of what he said about the defensive tackles. Some of that's also present with some of the offers that Georgia's shown. In fact, let's kind of take a look at where we are on that offer list for Georgia right now. Let's do offense here first, and what jumps out at you, Jeff, at what you see right there?
Well, first of all, Brandon, I know everybody like yourself is a fan of the quarterback position. That list sample size keeps narrowing down. Dugan makes a commitment. You see Sam Howell make a commitment to Florida State since our last show. Holinsky, a lot of guys. Clemson also picked up a guy that Georgia was looking at as well. So that number is dwindling out of those 14. There's really only about 7 or 8 guys that legitimately don't have their school figured out yet.
And most of these are just camp invitations for the most part anyway, correct?
Yeah, I'm kind of warming to the idea that maybe Georgia's future 2019 signee, if they get one at quarterback, doesn't even have his legit offer, even the initial offer, much less the camp offer and everything else. Running back, always an issue there. Georgia at wide receiver, they got Jaden Hazelwood committed, Dominic Blaylock committed. Those guys are solidly committed. Pappoe also said that Hazelwood hits him really hard about coming and playing with him as well. I think that's some of the dogs he's talking about there. Rylan Godey, Luke Griffin, we've seen the recent decommitment there. I think the more I look at Georgia's offensive line class, they might only end up with 2 or 3 guys in the class of 2019 moving forward. And then on the defensive side of the ball, you see what you look like there. Defensive tackle, always very important. 18 guys have been offered there. I think 236 is now the official number according to 24/7 Sports. Georgia, defensive end, some of these are outside linebackers. I actually think Bill Norton might be one of those guys that they lump in when they're trying to sign 4 defensive tackles. Looky there, Roquan Smith. We've already talked about Owen Pappoe. A guy that popped up on my phone recently is Tresman Marshall. Is a guy that you need to watch for there as well. Everybody's talking and wondering about him. He's a guy that's also going to be able to probably be at G-Day as well.
Yeah, that's one of those things I wanted to ask you about, because in Marshall's case, that is one of those linebackers. And we're going to pay a lot of attention to Owen Pappoe because his decision's upcoming, and that's a name we've been talking about for a while. But Marshall doesn't really take a back seat to him in terms of a prospect, and it's a guy that, unlike Pappoe, who's going to be in State College being impressed by Penn State, Georgia's likely going to have a chance, among a lot of other visitors, to impress Tresman Marshall on G-Day here.
Yeah, Marshall, he's kind of more of the classic prototype Alabama, Georgia inside linebacker. He's about 6'2", about 234, downhill guy, really big thumper. He's a guy that's going to make his decision probably a little bit after Pappoe, but, Owen Pappoe is going to be a special niche guy you got to put on the field, sideline to sideline, chase things down, really intelligent player. Tresman Marshall, you're going to stay away from A-gap and B-gap with that guy, and he's going to rattle some heads.
Speaking of Tresman Marshall, expected G-Day visitor, let's take a look at a few more of the folks who are looking to visit for this upcoming Saturday. Big, long list, Jeff, and exciting names. Let's start with the 2019 prospects here.
Yeah, no, one thing I want to make sure, scheduled to attend, everybody expects the commitments to be there, so our list is not going to include any of those commitments. Colby Wooden is a guy at Archer to look at there. Trayvon Walker is probably the most impressive name on this board. Nation's number 3 defensive tackle. I've always maintained he was the most important person in this class. Owen Pappoe is maybe right on his heels as well. Jalen Humphreys is another one of those nose guard types, defensive tackle types. Kyle Hamilton coming off a big visit to Michigan. He made it up to Michigan even though they canceled their spring game. He didn't take his unofficial visit to Northwestern. He doesn't think he's going to make that one up. Derek Greene is a name. He may even not show up as well since he just recently recommitted to Oklahoma. And 2020, when you flip the list there as well, that's some names. Look at that, Arik Gilbert, an athlete out of Marietta High. Is he a tight end? It sounds like he's going to be a tight end, even though he has the stuff to be a legit top 5 defensive end. Kobe Hudson is a wide receiver out of LaGrange, Georgia. Dejon Edwards, we wrote about him on the intel over the last week. He's a guy that has Georgia as his outright leader. And another big, huge name there is Brian Breesy, the #1 overall player for 2020. Going to make another trip, his second trip in 2 months to Georgia.
Huge, huge prospect for the class of 2020. Look forward to seeing Breesy in Athens on Saturday. Look forward to seeing many of you as well. If you can't be there, we've got a huge day coming up for you in terms of broadcast, really all day long, from pregame to postgame. Of course, G-Day coming up this Saturday. You can watch the game at 4 p.m. on ESPN, but our coverage is going to be going on all day long. Jeff, we're going to be in Sanford Stadium before the game. We'll see Justin Fields when he warms up for the first time. We'll get a chance to talk to you there live about some of those recruits who are already filing their way into Sanford Stadium. And then after the game, very special post-game show appearance. You're going to be there. I'm going to be there. We have a special guest that's going to be on hand for us as well. I look forward to unveiling that for you in the days to come. But it's going to be a massive, massive day of coverage on all the video channels for DawgNation. Going to be a ton of fun.
Yeah, things to think about. The West End Zone construction. I think the 96K or 93K day will probably shrink to maybe 78, 80,000. No official numbers are out there yet. There will be a dog walk. Gates will open at 1 p.m. for you fans that want to get in there early and claim your seat. There will be actually reserved seats. You'll get a ticket in an area you should sit in and everything else like that. But dog walk will also take place. It's going to take place, I believe, around 250. It's going to be in a different spot. It's going to be around Zell Miller Drive. Everybody will be looking for that. We'll be broadcasting the dog walk live as always, taking some pictures and bringing you guys the picture right there from Sanford Stadium. Before we say goodbye, let me try to squeeze in a couple comments. Obviously, I always love doing that. I like Tom Lavelle's comment here, who says that Clemson had a great recruiting weekend with their inter-squad game. Is UGA going to come close to that success with G-Day coming up this weekend? Obviously, Frank Ladson, the name that comes to mind here first. Huge receiver. Clemson earned his commitment over the weekend. That sets the bar high for Georgia, does it not? Well, yeah, and I don't really see Georgia having a Clemson-like type recruiting weekend on G-Day, especially with 5 stars, a quarterback, the multiple names that all committed to Clemson on that weekend. But it's interesting, Brandon. I'll probably write about this sometime during the week in the Intel, but these spring games are getting crazy. You had at Oklahoma, you had fans kicking, you had the kickers on the team kicking balls into the stands for fans to wear. They had music playing while things were going on. You had celebrity coaches. Really made it a fan-friendly event. Oklahoma had a really good few bells and whistles for their spring game. On YouTube, Willie McGuire says, Owen Pappoe, who we talked about earlier, only wants to play with dogs. He says if you want to play with the dogs, Georgia's the place you got to go to be able to do that. I know, Brennan, and I mean, he said that twice, and people were probably on me. Why didn't you spell dogs the right way in D-A-W-G? Those persons may have not been named Brandon Adams. But I want to ask you, astute soothsayer of all things Bulldogs. Please. You watched those videos. You were peering on them. You saw them live. Give me some real-time reaction, my man. What did you think after watching that? It reminds me a lot of Justin Fields, who, around a year or so ago was doing everything he could to make his recruitment seem like it was wide open. I think that's within his right. I thought it was within Fields' right a year ago. I think it's within Pappoe's right now. Hazelwood, Nolan Smith, a couple other guys who enjoyed the process. I don't fault these guys for wanting to feel that way, for wanting to play this out, but clearly Pappoe is playing the game right now. And for fans who are trying to sort of figure out where it's going on May 1st, we may all have to wait until May 1st to truly find out there at that point. I'm going to give you everyone the pinch yourself moment, the litmus moment. Okay, when you watch Roquan Smith make play after play, junior season, sophomore year, when he was evolving into the best player on the team, did it ever even enter into your mind, wow, that young man had a very convoluted and twisting, turning recruitment? Nobody ever thought about that. Once he got that red and black on and that G on, starts making plays, most people would probably say it was worth all those fingernail chewing and annoyances. Without a doubt. After that. Well said. That's Jeff Sintel. That's why we love him. Of course, we love watching him every week here. I'm normally a viewer. Tonight I got to sit next to him. How much fun was that on Before the Hedges presented by Kroger? Don't forget a couple things. First of all, for those of you who checked us out on Twitter for the first time tonight, it was great to be able to present that to you. If you missed a portion of the broadcast, if it's more convenient for you to listen to the podcast, we now have a Before the Hedges presented by Kroger podcast. Check that out. Just search for DawgNation for Before the Hedges. You should be able to find that on all the various podcast channels. A lot of different ways for folks to find Before the Hedges presented by Kroger each and every week. Brendan, I tell you what, Hannah better watch herself. She better not get married every weekend. You could be pulling a Lou Gehrig and Wally Pippen her right now on her comfortable Monday slot. I'm only thankful to be able to sit in her spot here for this week. Thanks for being here as well. Don't forget, I'll see you tomorrow morning for DawgNation Daily, starting at 10 a.m. Y'all have a great night. Thanks for checking us out, and we'll see you soon right here on DawgNation.